Yeah, the ding dong battle, the back and forth. We didn't think this was gonna happen, and yeah, we're now 5th of August, so only a few days after the deadline actually opened. I mean, he had denied it at one point, but you said you have to deny these things, and right you were. We also saw a lot of staff members leaving Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe, leaving Soudal, I think, as well. So the signs were there, but for some reason, I was thinking, well, loyalty will come first here with Soudal Quick-Step, but no. And obviously, there's going to be some sort of compensation deal in here to buy out his contract as well. The 2 million figure was thrown about, but yeah, what do you think this means for Remco Evenepoel and him going forward as well?
I think ultimately, for his GC aspirations, Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe will be a stronger team for him to have around him than Soudal Quick-Step. I feel like Soudal Quick-Step, Evenepoel's with his team, has been with this team for many, many years now. And it feels like they were always a classic style squad, which was trying to reinvent themselves into a GC team. And I don't think it ever really worked out, even with the signings of, Mario van Zevenont, Tilan van Wilde, Valentin Padepentler, Louis Vivaca, like all these good climbers. It never really seemed to quite work out. Obviously, Remco did win that Vuelta a España, but it's never really. I feel like he's always required a little bit more or always been left lacking, um, you know, in terms of his support around him in higher mountains. So I think Red Bull Hansgrohe will be a better fit for him as a GC prospect. So I think overall it's a good move for him to go there because more than likely he's gonna benefit from Grand Tour support.
What do you make of the increase in competition? Obviously, there's Florian Lipovic, there's Roglic still under contract that they were very adamant about as well. There is a Blazov in there. There's a Jide Hindley who probably wants his own chances. There's a Pelizari who is growing in stature as well in terms of the professional ranks. So where do you slot a Remco Evenepoel into this picture? Is it all in for Remco Evenepoel, even though Florian Lipovic is this year's third place finisher and white jersey in the Tour de France?
Yeah, it's super tricky, isn't it, to piece all that because I don't think it's going to work particularly well. Like you say, there's just too many chefs in the kitchen at the moment. And although I think I've seen the articles of Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe being very adamant that Roglic is staying and that, they do have a contract lined up for him, it just doesn't make sense unless they're planning on doing a bit of a UAE Team Emirates and having just resplendent riches of riders to just send to all sorts of races. Just an embarrassment of riches, really. I don't really see it working out that well. I would actually say, I mean, maybe this is just my own bias coming into it, but Leapovitz beat. I know Remco's not had a fantastic year in terms of his preparation. He had that crash earlier on in the year, but he was beaten by Leapovitz in the Tour and in the Criterium du Dauphiné. And I think that Leapovitz is a more okay. His time trialing isn't as good as Remco's, obviously, but I think Leapovitz is the up and coming guy, and I think that he can really, we don't really know how like Leapovitz could definitely improve. We don't really know about Remco. He seems a little bit inconsistent at times. So I think that duo maybe together would work. But when you start combining in, Roglic in there and Pellizzari, like you say, like he's also such a fantastic talent. Who knows where he might have come in the Giro d'Italia this year if he wasn't having to help Roglic out for the first half of the race. I think they've almost got too many GC riders in there, and I think that it's not going to be easy to try and fit them all together. You're going to see the likes of Hindley and Vlasov probably almost giving up their Grand Tour hopes and just becoming super domestiques in the future, I expect. And I think the big question for me is Roglic.
Yeah, I think it's probably what Jens Vogt said in a video where he was saying that these deals are probably signed in the classics. So at that time, you don't know Florian Lipovic is suddenly this amazing rider in the Grand Tour, and it is going to be a bit of a headache. Do you think Remco is now the big deal in the team? And obviously, the other factor that we haven't talked about either is he's going from specialized bikes to specialized bikes. So the teams, it doesn't really change there.
Yeah, it doesn't really change that much. And that's probably part of the reason why this deal came off as opposed to other teams which aren't on specialized bikes, just for that ease of transition. And is Remco Evenepoel going to be the big deal? I think he will be. At the end of the day, having a rider of that stature is a big deal to be bringing into the team. He's big for publicity. I'd say he's probably the biggest. He's going to be the biggest name on the team. I would, you know, did no disrespect to the rest of the riders on the team, but Remco is sort of a big name in the media as opposed to other people like, no offense, like Roglic and people, but Remco is, yeah, probably quite the hot property to have. And yeah, it's not very often that a top three, top five at the very minimum GC rider comes up on the market. And this is probably going to be the biggest move of the transfer season, if you can call it that. So yeah, I think that Remco will get quite a lot of priority in the team going forwards.
But I mean, we have to look on the flip side as well. Soudal Quick-Step, a team that he's been part of since 2000, well, 2018 was when he was double junior champ. Then he got signed by them, debuted as a 18-year-old, won San Sebastian with them there, then started this amazing journey that he's done. Yeah, they've obviously transformed a lot as a team from a classics team, sprinters team. Obviously, they still have Tim Muller and they still have other sprinters or have had sprinters while Remco was there. But now they were more transforming into that Remco Evenepoel team. But Louis Varake, he just extended. So yeah, Landers there, all these Valentin Panapantra, all these riders. So where do they go from here now?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. Obviously, they've already signed Stuyven so far in this transfer season. Maybe that's indicative of a movement back towards a classic style squad. I think it'll be quite good to see that. I think we've all sort of associated Soudal Quick-Step with Cobble Classics. And if kind of the rumours or anything to go by, somebody like Dylan van Baal could also end up at the team. And like you say, because Remco has been bought out of his contract, because he was contracted until 2026 with Soudal Quick-Step, so Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe had to buy that out, and that will give Soudal Quick-Step, a little bit of a stash of gold to go and start spending on it, go on a little bit of a shopping spree to try and reinvent the team, which, it's not, that sort of money probably doesn't come into teams very frequently. Get yourself a little splurge of money to go and spend. And I think it's quite interesting to speculate as to what kind of riders they might try and sign. Is this GC is no more of a team? I know they've got Lander in here, but is this more, trying to get towards the Cobbles Classics team again and, bringing in, they've got a good development team, and is it a focus more on that? Like, who would you sign if you had the option of realistic people to sign?
I think Biniam Girmay at this point is he's been linked to the team and that kind of classic setup. He's more a classics rider than Tim Merlier, so maybe that is the guy. I mean, he has been linked with them, Belgian team, coming from a Belgian team as well.